Hey everyone, this is Exploring Fiction, and welcome back to another video. Hey, before we get to the video, check this out. 99% of my viewers are not subscribed. If you're a part of that 99%, please consider subscribing, as I would love to have you here. Anyway, let's get back to the video. So guys, this video is going to be my thoughts on The Terminal List, the new series starring Chris Pratt as Commander James Reese, based on the book series by former Navy SEAL Jack Carr. So there will be a spoiler-free and spoiler-filled section of this video, so I'll read off the synopsis of the show first, then get right into the spoiler-free section. So right now I'll go ahead and put up the timestamp on the screen for where the spoiler-filled section starts, and I'll also put it in the description below. But anyway, let's get to that synopsis. James Reese returns home after his entire platoon of Navy SEALs is ambushed, only to discover new dark forces working against him and endangering the ones he loves. So, getting into my spoiler-free thoughts, like the title says, this show was intense. Every single episode, I was on the edge of my seat for one reason or another. The action was violent, gory, and real. And I mean, every single action scene was well choreographed, well made, probably based heavily on real situations, and you could just feel the intensity of it all through the screen. Chris Pratt was great in a serious role as Commander James Reese, and the supporting cast around him was fantastic as well, especially Taylor Kitsch as Ben Edwards. He was a real standout. At times, this show plays like a typical government or big business conspiracy scorning the war vet type of story, but it also has some deviations from that general form that I enjoyed. Also, it has a reporter character, like a journalist, who isn't actually annoying. A lot of those times, at least to me, those sort of reporter characters come off really annoying and naggy, but the character of Katie in this one was not that. She was actually very interesting and a likable character. This show had lots of twists. Most I expected, but some I didn't see coming at all. There's one in particular, which I'll only be able to talk about in the spoiler-filled section. The unreliable narrator was used well in this story, as you had to question everything and couldn't ever be sure who or what to trust. And that's not really a spoiler because the unreliable narrator stems from the opening ambush that James Reese and his men walked into. And so from that, he becomes an unreliable narrator. And it was really used effectively because you had no idea at times what was real and what wasn't. If I were to have any negatives, it would be about how sometimes this show became a bit predictable, but otherwise, it was heart-stopping and enjoyable all at once. Okay guys, now we're getting into the spoiler-filled section. So if you haven't seen The Terminal List, I would click away now, go watch it, and then come back for this section of the video. Alright, here we go. Right off the bat, let me just say, I knew Reese's wife and daughter were going to die, because you can't go on a killing spree to uncover a government conspiracy with a family at home. So it didn't surprise me, but let me also say, and this might sound bad, but I'll give you my reason after. Thank God they did. That sounds really bad, but if they didn't die, it would be really hard to justify James Reese's actions at times. I mean, some of his kills were just so brutal and ruthless. I had to remember back to that scene of him finding his family, because some of his kills were just brutal, and, I was kind of wavering in my not liking, but trust that James Reese was doing the right thing. Because, drowning, lethal injection, multiple bombings, and disembowelment, he had some great violent kills, but they were brutal. And honestly, if they hadn't killed his wife and daughter, those kills would be so much less justifiable and not make Reese nearly as likable of a character throughout the series, because it would have been hard to root for him if he didn't have something so traumatic driving his actions. Like I said before, the character of Katie was a great reporter character, and one who finally didn't get on my nerves. A lot of the time, those types of characters do. She never sold Reese out or betrayed him for her story, so she kept her integrity, and I could really respect that, and for that reason she was a great character. Tony, the good guy at the FBI, grew on me the more he was on screen, and I think they might have left him open-ended for future stories. I haven't read the book, so I'm not quite sure. Still, if not, he grew on me as he grew more and more sympathetic for Reese and understood Reese's situation. Reese's men, though we saw little of them, were great. Even in flashbacks, the characters of Donnie and Boozer kind of stood out as these fun, brotherhood characters in Reese's SEAL team. But getting back to the unreliable narrator point, it was used very effectively in this show, especially since the government was trying to convince Reese his head injury was causing him to misremember things. Because you didn't know if Reese was being messed with by the government or if he was really misremembering things. And even though we saw the events of the prologue of the first episode play out the way they did, it really made you question, was Reese seeing things during that, or was that how it actually turned out? And events like Boozer being with him on the plane home, yet being found dead at his house one day earlier, stuff like that really made me more intrigued in the story. All the villains were great, and it was really satisfying seeing him cross each one off the list. Each one had their own sort of flair to them. Josh Holder, Saul Agnon, Marcus Boykin, the Mexican Trigger Man, who he disemboweled, Steve Horn, who I'll get to more in a second, Cox, Howard, and Pillar from, the chain of command in the military, the Secretary of Defense, Lorraine Hartley, and of course the last one, who I'll talk about later. They all kind of had their own personalities and really made each episode satisfying when Reese finally got them in the end. First, let's talk about Steve Horn. Jai Courtney was a great screen presence, so much so that I thought he would be the overarching villain of the story. He was the CEO of the company that made the medicine that gave Reese and his men tumors, and I figured the line stopped after him. But no, there were more people to hunt down, but still, Steve Horn deserved an extra bit of coverage because he was really a great screen presence, and I thought he was kind of the perfect rival character to Reese, but he didn't, he was cut down early. So, but still, Steve Horn, Jai Courtney as Steve Horn was great. The overall unraveling of the plot leading up to and in the finale made everything make sense, which I was afraid it wouldn't with so many loose ends going into the last episode. The drug project, RD-4895, was made by a company that was bought by Steve Horn, and then was authorized on use for Navy SEALs to try to preemptively treat PTSD. But it gave them brain tumors, and they were sent to die as a cover-up. Even if that sounds a bit complex, I wouldn't be surprised if that is realistic, to be honest. And so, learning all that for certain in the finale was really satisfying because, you didn't know who to trust, and knowing for certain, hearing it from the higher-up people's mouth who authorized that to happen, really gave you a peace of mind, not as in it was okay, but you finally learned the truth. And finally, the last point I wanted to get to, the last one on the terminal list, the big betrayal and reveal at the end of the finale, Reese's best friend, Ben. I think Ben might have been my favorite character for the entirety of the series, as he just seemed like a cool surfer dude mixed with a military man, and he was unwaveringly loyal. Except that he wasn't. When he survived the battle at Hartley's island home, I knew something was up. The best friend never survives the last battle in a political thriller. And then, when Katie told Reese the location of the last fake bank account, Peru, my heart dropped. Peru was where Ben said he wanted to go when all this blew over. And sure enough, he was the last one involved in the scandal. Sure, his reasoning was fine. He was told Reese and the others were already as good as dead with their tumors, so he figured they should all die fighting. But it was still a punch to the gut. And Reese couldn't allow for anyone to get away unscathed, even Ben. And Ben's death was tragic, but necessary, in the mind and eyes of Reese and us viewers. One final thing. I wasn't always sure the purpose of the flashback of the bird flying into the closed window of Reese's home, and why it showed up so many times, but after watching the finale, I can only assume it was so that he could reflect on how he explained death to his daughter, and thus could learn to let go of her and his wife. But that's only my interpretation. Let me know what you think. So, the best way I can think to describe the Terminal List is intense. Action-packed, violent, emotional, it's all these things. As of the time I'm recording this video, it hasn't been picked up by Amazon for a second season, which is a real shame considering 4 other novels are already written, laying the groundwork. This show definitely deserves more, as it was really worth the time spent watching. I can't recommend it enough, especially to people who like gritty, action-packed political thrillers. So guys, those are my thoughts on The Terminal List, starring Chris Pratt. Leave a comment, let me know what you thought about the show if you've seen it. And if you haven't seen it, let me know if you want to below in the comments. Leave a like if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new here, I would love to have you. And like always, I will see you next time.